Good evening and welcome to another one of our mammoth streams. It's not gonna run too big here. Oh god, I'm spoiling what we're doing. Put the thumbnail back up. I'm gonna run too
Spoilers! It never
spoiler.
happened.
Yeah, spoiler alert. Spoiler alert. It's not gonna run too long, but God, we have a lot to cover today. It's well, it. I don't know. Do we want to go through some normal YouTubey stuff first, or do you want to
Well,
intro
I
yourself?
was just saying I can at least say hello
Yes.
first. Hello. No, as per usual, thank you to the people that show up for these streams and those people especially who are members and do the super chats and the stream
Yes,
labs and
yes.
the super stickers if they wish to give us aids for some
That's
reason or another.
God, those are so gay.
But as always, it makes what we're doing worthwhile, especially when there's a lot of, especially this week's stuff has really been a large part of also the preparation for last week's stuff. And I
Yeah.
know people thought last week's stream was dense, but oh boy, you ain't seen nothing yet.
Well, it's just the problem is that there's a lot of like dots to connect
Yes.
and that kind of stuff. The issue is that there's a huge amount of webbed stuff together. Um,
Oh.
it's the thing is on their own as is designed. None of these issues look particularly. You can kind of hand wave them away.
No, they would seem like either sort of virtue signals or something that would only apply to a certain subset of people. They seem like very kind of non-policies, non-effective policies, as it were. But when they all come together, and especially when we add to this the vector we began to understand the other week, which is this sort of asymmetric way of applying policy imperially through more local institutions by using national institutions to strong arm them. Yes, as Cliff J to the chat is New Britain, guys. Exactly, and in New Britain, you will be demobilized.
Yes,
Is the
you will
crux
be.
of it.
To go through our normal YouTube stuff though, the best way to donate to us is still through Streamlabs. That takes the smallest cut and gets to us the quickest. The next best way is through YouTube and Super Chat and all that. Although becoming a member is quite beneficial because that gives us a regular income then, and
Yes.
it's quite useful. A lot of we've had a very consistent amount of members, so thank you to those guys. We will also be doing a community stream, speaking of that, on the 28th of December.
Yes, it'll
So
be slightly earlier, sort of 5 o'clock Wednesday evening, I think.
we will see. It'll be 5, 6 o'clock UK time. But we'll be there. I think Trig will be there. I need to double check with him. He gave a soft yes, I think. But we'll be there anyway, and we'll be trying to have some people
But
on.
look at the telegrams, follow the Substacks,
Yes.
and
Stuff's in the description. We have our Telegram down there. We have our Substack down there, as you mentioned, Anti-Politics. There's no more stuff, which is a little bit quiet at the moment, but we will be on the 21st, on Wednesday, on Millennial.
we will indeed.
Discussing the No More stuff. So if you guys want to look that up, that's Millennial Woes. He's on Odyssey. He's not disappeared as many people thought he did.
No.
But we'll be on Millennial Woes' stream on Millennial this year. Me and you talking about our No More stuff. But we
should probably crack on because there's just a lot to get through here. So
yeah, we'll give a proper intro as to what it is. There were a lot of headlines, a lot of quite alarmist headlines, really. I don't think framed it particularly well about climate lockdowns
Yes.
and people being locked in their neighborhoods and a mention of the 50-minute city stuff. And it's all about Oxford, and it's all about these new plans for Oxford, which are plans to create these new traffic calming
Yeah.
zones.
Oh, essentially, a number of sites, your Gareth Ikes and all sorts of people have already covered this, but they've neglected to mention facts that you think they would, or
Yes.
the research that they should have really done. So instead, they are speculating on one piece of information. When we actually look at the thing more detailed and look at the other connecting kind of points, you realize actually there's a lot more going on here,
Yes.
and that the fact that they are not talking about that then calls into question another sort of weird angle to it. But we'll make a start.
We'll tackle that one. I've got up the kind of one of the inciting stories here, which we'll get to later. This is kind of in the middle or the early, I guess, the second third of what we were doing because there's a lot to cover before we really get here. The proposal is that traffic filters will divide Oxford, the kind of city centre and outlying areas, into these 15-minute neighbourhoods.
Yes.
And that was made very explicitly clear. We'll go through it in detail because a lot of this has now been partially denied by the authorities. But I think the framing of this has actually been relatively poor. This isn't technically really about climate change. It's framed that way and it's excused that way. But what this is further what we're referring to here is demobilization. There's a lot of this stuff to do with like things like degrowth and all of that, which we'll
Yes.
probably go through at a later date. I guess we can flash up the collapse watch thing here.
Well, yeah, it's kind of one of those things. I think if we were involved in slightly more unserious spheres, people would be like, "Oh, well, why are you talking about this? Don't you want it to collapse and this, that, and the next thing?" Which is a completely different aside question. It's very much just like we just want to understand what's going on first and
Yes.
foremost before we even begin to ask the question of is this good for us? And yeah, so I don't know. Join us as we try and find out what the hell's going on.
Well, the framing of this as well is to do with the New Britain document.
Yes.
We talked about last time. New Britain, guys. New Britain.
It's like the old Britain, but the roads don't work.
Yeah,
But the
and
roads never worked anyway, so the roads just work worse.
Yeah, and in New Britain, you'll be able to get precisely nowhere.
And you get speed cameras for
Yeah,
walking
you'll
too
be in
quickly on
a-
the pavement.
You'll be in a new car, in a new traffic jam.
A Neo car.
Yeah, and you'll be stuck in your new build.
Oh no.
In New Britain. But yeah, we've flashed that.
Just
Nice.
leave that up there. man.
Maybe we'll just leave the New Britain. This is part. I guess we can call this part of our New Britain series. But these are plans and these are things that have been in the works for a very, very long time. And we're going to use Oxford here as a case study because
Well, I
Oxford.
think we could maybe even go slightly further back and say that this really all springs forward from something like London congestion charges.
Well, yes, that's the first thing I'm going to go over. In that, if you look at what Oxford had first, if you
and
look
this is their city council page.
Yeah, this is our city council page. So the first measure that Oxford had, which really does spring from the trial, which was the congestion charge. If you look at London, London really is where all of this is prototyped. Then you have areas like Oxford, or as we'll get onto later, the whole of Greater Manchester, which we could end up having, which have these new measures trialed on a kind of national level. Or London is a captured city. London is not a proper place. You have all these schemes trialed in places like Oxford because Oxford is considered one of the most captured cities in the UK. It is one of the most open to a lot of these climate
Well,
proposals.
it was always a joke in Top Gear
Yeah.
many years ago that Oxford was a city that hated the car and was
Yes.
basically designed for cyclists. Tried to do a bit of a kind of Holland thing with it, and it never really worked
Well,
anyway.
That's how they're justifying this, and that's what they're trying to do here. Originally, what you had a very, very low kind of impact scheme, which was Oxford's low emission zone. And all of these measures start with a low emission zone, a congestion charge zone, or some zone in which the most polluting traffic is separated out and charged. And what you have here is just one that affects buses. It affects public transports. They're trying to get down their nitrogen oxide emissions. You'll see this.
Oh, but surely they'd be concerned about CO2 and the global warming effect from that gas.
Well, what what you get here is a lot of talk about legally mandated, either European or British, different levels of different substances in the air.
Yeah.
What happened was, if you were alive in 2007, 2008, you'll remember the diesel push. There was a massive push
That was a
towards.
massive, was
yeah,
it EU 6 or whatever
yeah.
regulation that God knows how many vans across Britain were scrapped because of that policy.
Yes, but there was a huge push towards diesel. And it turned out that diesel had a whole bunch of other problems because diesel is not as clean burning, really, as petrol is in many ways.
But the scientists told us it was clean burning. What do you mean it's not?
So there was this massive push towards diesel, and then now there is this massive push away from diesel. They've created a problem, and now they're creating the solution to it, which is this idea that the air becomes unbreathable if a diesel vehicle drives, within the air. So a lot of this will be licensing bus, licensing traffic, but it is enforced by cameras.
Hmm.
All of these schemes start with the installation of
Well,
cameras.
it'll seem, or it'll very much ape as we did with the rewilding
Yeah.
phenomena. The more you look into it, the more you realize that no matter what eco measure it is, there is always a security state aspect behind it.
Yes.
Because of course, if you're going to study the environment, or you're going to study people's movement throughout the environment and the effect that has, then you need to know where they are. They need to know where they're going, where they're going to end up, and how they're going to get back. What method of transport they're using, what time of day the transport they're using, because there's a great double whammy here. As soon as you start, engaging in clean air zones, you can also say that it's traffic mitigation,
Yes.
and that all of a sudden you've now got two ends of policy around a similar aspect in life, which is travel, that both facilitate, a surveillance state around them.
Well, you also manage to appeal to two groups. You appeal to the environmentalists, the global-brained people. Appeal to the NIMBYs who go, "Oh, I like less traffic on my road." That's really the dual appeal they go for with these. But like anything, it doesn't matter how innocuous the measure seems. What matters is the enforcement. And to
I see. I find
enforce,
it funny as well that at the bottom of this list,
yeah,
it's just cut off at the screen at the moment, but not only are they talking about low emission zones, but London has its own ultra low emission
we'll be
zone.
going through that.
So this is that like, not even congestion charge? Is that like EV only?
Some of it. We'll see that. We'll see there's a hodgepodge of these different schemes. That's the next. You're spoiling the next step here. But the clean air zones now exist in Bath, Birmingham, Bradford. I don't know. I'd rather have diesel smell than curry smell.
Yeah.
Bristol, Greater Manchester, under review. We'll get to that one because the Greater Manchester one is its own thing. Portsmouth, Sheffield.
Sheffield could just do a Bath in general.
Yeah, Tyneside, Newcastle, and Gateshead. But that's not all of them really. This excludes Oxford. They have a whole bunch of other kind of new
And
zones.
Norwich,
I
yeah.
believe. There's another map. Yeah.
And you're also going to tell me Cambridge and other university towns don't have something like this. I also believe Chester might be doing something similar as well.
This is another map here because
there you go. York, Birmingham, Southampton. There's even more on there, and this is other proposed ones.
It's hard to read because it's the wrong
Plus
colour.
Glasgow, Aberdeen, Edinburgh.
I'll open that in a new tab. But this isn't even all of them. But this has London, Brighton, Southampton, Bristol, Birmingham, Manchester, Sheffield, York, Newcastle, Glasgow, Aberdeen. These are either they're kind of keyed here, clean air zones or proposed clean air zones. And some of these proposed ones have gone through. So you start to see how widespread this is becoming. It's going to become a feature, really, of every town centre in Britain.
Yeah.
I will explain where this impetus. Well, we'll explain it now, but we'll explain in more detail where the impetus comes from later on. But the impetus really is coming from central government, but it is being left to local government for the detailed implementation.
Well, you've got a note here as well at the bottom of this section of the notes that it's a progressive policy by segments of vehicle as well. So
yes,
first it's where buses can and can't go. It's a fee charged to the bus company for the number of buses, and then it's commercial vehicles, and then it's things like taxis, and then before you know it, it's just everybody.
Well, that's progression, really. If you look at all of these clean air schemes, first of all, they're to do with cleaning up the buses, electrifying the bus. Nobody really cares. Then it is commercial vehicles, lorries, it's light goods vehicles, it's vans. Then it moves to private hire vehicles, like you said, and then it moves on to, finally, private vehicles. And all of this is a method of boiling the frog. It is, we will have an anti-congestion zone in the middle of town.
Yeah.
We will have, by the way, the anti-congestion zone going to help climate change. We have to put all these cameras have to put up because we have to monitor every car that goes in and out of the town centre to make sure it's paying the congestion / recharge.
I can remember in Glasgow when they brought in loads and loads of new bus lanes.
Yeah.
And then people were like, "Oh, well, the bus lanes don't work because people don't use them right." And like, "Oh, well, we'll put cameras down." And everybody that drove on the bus lanes get fined. And now that they're using them as emission zones, they already have the cameras there in place, as we'll see with some of these other policies as well. As we go back to the stuff from Oxford.
Well, we're going
Council.
back to Oxford here. Oxford in 2013 got its low emission zone. In 2019, and this scheme is still ongoing, and until Oxford, the main scheme we'll be talking about, they're having a zero emission zone pilot. This is all, again, they use different language for the same things to make it deliberately confusing and to make it sound more local. These are not national schemes. Technically, these are all local schemes. There's a national requirement to get rid of all these nitrogen oxides and, get rid of your bad air. You got to clean your air up. But the actual implementation of the legal requirements is technically in the zone of
so
local government.
If you drive into Oxford, there's a big sign with like Michael Rosen on it. It's like, no breathing.
Yeah, exactly. But there's, to go back to the .gov website, you've talked about the fact that there's a different service if you want to drive into London's low or ultra low emission zones. Which basically means I don't actually have a map up for this. I might grab. There's a great map that I saw which showed basically how it's grown. There it is.
It's like Dante's Inferno.
Yeah, it is like Dante's
carbon
Inferno.
mitigation.
If we look at, God, it goes all the way down past Croydon. If we look at the map of London here, we can see how this effect works. Originally, it was just this red area here in the middle. It was just the congestion charge zone. It was just to stop central London being as congested. That's how they justified it. It was all about London not having as many cars in the center of it and being a more pleasant place to walk around and being just generally working and not being in gridlock. Then they expanded that to what was the original low emission zone.
Yes.
What is now the ultra low emission zone is the original low emission zone.
Is the low emission zone here basically most of Greater London at this point?
Yeah, it goes all the way out to places like Uxbridge. It's right down past Croydon. You're starting to get into Kent.
Because it's kind of a weird shape there, isn't it? But I suppose is that just based on?
I think that's based on municipal county.
Oh yeah,
boundaries.
you can actually see there is a thin, blue line. Is that like London borough, like county sort of?
I believe you start getting into Kent after that. So yeah,
right.
Bexley Heath. It goes past Romford. All the way. It's up here.
It basically fills the entire M25 area.
Yeah. Basically, the M25 is being they're using the dot fill tool in the M25.
And we might as well maybe not fully carry it through, but make mention of the fact that once you have, not just one congestion zone, but you've got the ultra low emission zone and low emission zone, you're going to have to track people as they move from one to the other.
Well, all of these include the congestion charge boundary, all the roads on the boundary of any of these boundaries are filled with cameras.
Yeah.
There are possibly thousands, if not tens of thousands with the interlinking roads of traffic enforcement cameras dedicated to these schemes. We'll find out later when we talk about Greater Manchester that even their pilot scheme there, 800 cameras installed for a single scheme. And London and Greater London, with just the density of people, probably has numbers in excess of that. So it must be in the thousands. But this is how these schemes expand. You end up with, again, boiling the frog. It spreads out like a cancer. And all of this really, ultimately, is to make it harder for people to have autonomy. To make it harder for people to move around. Make it harder for people to leave their communities now. We'll see the greatest justification for that. But we're kind of describing how the frog gets boiled here. This is an explainer of Oxford's zero emission zone, the ZEZ pilot. It is right in the middle. To improve air quality, some local authorities are introducing clean air zones. The clean air zones aim to discourage polluting vehicles from entering the zone. It's all very technical language, but this affects people.
Yeah. No vehicle is actually banned from entering the zone, but you may have to pay to drive in the zone if your vehicle exceeds certain emission standards. Lots of subjectivity going on there. The ZEZ, I might just refer to that as the ZEZ now.
The ZEZ, yes.
The ZEZ is like a stricter type of CAS, cities like London, Birmingham, and Bristol already have CAS in place, but the ZES aims to reduce inner city air pollution even further by allowing zero emission vehicles to drive in the city centre without carrying a charge. So there we go. There's your
Yeah, this is EV only.
so when they make these electric cars and you plug them into the wall in your house, where does the electricity come from?
Oh, it comes from a magical place.
It comes from the hydroelectric
It's the
plants
wind.
we don't
The
have.
wind farm. The wind
Yeah.
farm that makes up 11% of our power. Big brain content. I can't Z's.
These nuts.
These nuts. So we see how these schemes intensify. You have these emission zones that spread, and to enforce them, you must have ever more cameras.
Yeah, dude. Smith and chat. Man, the government buying all those speed cameras must make the line go up. Glad their economy isn't fictitious.
So the ultra low emission, this ultra low emission zone we talked about, is now being expanded out into all of the low emission zone areas.
See, this is almost like a phone jacker bit because we've got the Zs, the Cas, and then we've got the Ulas.
The ULAs. We must get the ULAs. So the congestion charge zone was the original. Then, like I said, you have these ever expanding rings of car hell.
Well, see, they're saying that the ultra low emission zone is expanding from 29th August 2023 across all London boroughs.
Yeah.
So what's the point of the low emission zone if it's all going to become an ultra low emission zone?
The point is to boil the frog.
Yes, no, of course. So does that mean what was the ultra low emission zone before is now the zero emission zone?
Well, you can't drive. Yeah, scrappage scheme. Here we go. From the 30th of January 2023, Londoners receiving certain disability and means-tested benefits can apply for a car and motorcycle scrappage scheme. Ooh. Basically, it means that if you live in Greater London...
Yes, Guy News got the right point. But
Yeah.
can it be dooved?
the dude. Basically, this is just a big scam to say if you're poor, you can't have a car.
But first there were Kaz, now there is Zez, and now there is Rulers.
Well, you start to realise how this applies pressure to people.
Yes.
And how this essentially cuts further and further people out of being like part of the vehicle owning classes, as it were. And the excuses in London, well, you can get around on public transport, so you don't need a car. And that's how it's framed. It's like, well, tubes or no car. No car for you. You don't need a car. You don't need to travel to other parts of the country.
What, you want to take things with you when you travel?
Yeah.
That sounds
Oh.
privileged.
It's so terrible. But yeah, you have all these ever expanding schemes.
Oh no, there we go, mini Holland.
Well, we're getting onto. So first of all, you have low emission zones. Then you have ultra low emission zones and zero emission zones. And the next step in boiling the frog is what are referred to as the leses, which is funny. But
So sorry, we've got the Kaz, the Zez, the Ules, and the Les.
Yeah. These are low traffic neighborhoods. They're traffic calming. Initially sold as city center only, but basically it turns every street into a cul-de-sac.
This again, it apes so perfectly of the stuff we talk to people about with digital ID and UBI.
Yes.
That both of these systems require some form of security state that monitors the roads and activity on the roads.
Yes.
Neither of them directly call for it. They each call for a part and a piece of it. And in doing so, they would construct this whole sort of security road system that you would have. In the same way that UBI and immigration require digital ID as the sort of midway between the two of those to actually make it make any sense.
Well, it's the justification here is a reduction in car usage under 3 London schemes to encourage ministers in their vision of Britain going Dutch.
So they've got to wear clogs and stink of weed.
Well, there's so much unsaid here. It's a reduction in car usage. How have they reduced car usage? They've made driving a car unviable in these areas.
There just happens to be a war on in Ukraine that's making petrol at
Yeah.
an extra 30-40 pence over it was a couple of years ago.
But there's this idea that people willfully... There's the unnecessary journey.
The people don't want to drive cars anymore,
No.
you know.
It's all framed as curbing people driving 2 minutes to the shops, curbing people doing what are unnecessary journeys. But who gets to decide what is and isn't an unnecessary autonomous vehicle journey? You start to get into like the real sovereign power stuff here, the decision
Cars for the people, comrade.
Yeah. You start to get into like the cars for the people comrade, and that it's like being an essential worker. It's like,
Uh,
are you an essential worker, and is your car journey an
well,
essential
it's like
car journey?
when you try to explain to people how bad it actually is in China when it comes to like personal mobility, that if you have a license
Yeah,
and you have a car that's registered and legal, you then need to, in advance, sometimes over 6 months, apply for the days that you wish to drive the car, then have the government verify whether or not you're allowed to do it on those days. It's very much what they're heading towards. I mean, it's a very simple way of like, oh, just look at China and look what they're doing, but it's almost one for one.
well, it's you either love or hate low traffic neighborhoods, LTNs, which have prompted bitter row since Boris Johnson started setting them up 12 months ago to encourage people to get
At
out of
the
their cars, cycle, or
Can we go to
walk.
the fourth paragraph here? Look at
Yeah.
the therapeutic state ripping out of this. Separately, 4 local authorities, again local
Yeah.
authorities, are to be designated GP prescribing pilots. Patients will be provided with a free bicycle by their doctor, trained in how to ride it, and directed to segregated cycling lanes.
Extremely based.
So
So we're
now
going to get white only site now.
the National Travel Health Service. I mean, what's the fact that these I try to explain to someone even 20 years ago
Yeah.
the fact that you know we don't necessarily have like a department for transport in the same way that federally the Americans do,
Yeah.
but that local departments and councils for transport and traffic would be working with GPs to put bikes for free in the hands of people. They'd be like, "What the fuck are you
Well, this
talking
is,
about?"
again, this is extremely infantilizing.
Hmm.
And it seemed also geared towards like people who are fresh off the boat. This feels very much like a scheme that was made for children.
Hmm.
It's something to expect to happen to children. It's like your doctor's going to prescribe a bicycle for you. You're going to be trained how to ride it and directed to your local cycling lane. You're going to have people who don't speak a lick of English wobbling on these government Boris bikes
Oh
along the
no,
bike
they're going to be
lane.
those horrible like council bikes they have in like city centres across the UK.
Yeah.
They're going to weigh about 6 tons, and children are just going to be flattened with them everywhere. And there's going to be skate parks across the nation with trees littered with these things.
While protests in London boroughs, including Hackney, Ealing, and Wandsworth, have highlighted the problems caused by displaced congestion. Yeah, this traffic has to go somewhere.
Well, why didn't they just give everyone e-scooters? And we'll make Peter Hitchens lose his nut, and he'll go full sort of falling down on everyone.
Yeah. Oh dear. Well, it doesn't really talk about what these schemes include. They just talk about the fact that
Let's see the bottom of that there.
yeah.
Clyde Lokes, who as deputy leader of Waltham Forest Council introduced one of the country's first mini Holland schemes, says he won over sceptics because he did not present it solely as a transport initiative to reduce car dependency. When you take out thousands of car journeys, you create space for extra planting, for people to meet and chat, and for cafes and restaurants to be expanded out to pavement. Is this not exactly what happened during lockdown?
There'll be a lot of stuff about this where they're talking about maintaining the gains made during lockdown.
Ah.
The gains made, all of these choices that people were made when they were forced to stay in their homes, seem to be being continued.
Look at this one as well at the bottom here. The Bike Club, a rental firm that allows children to swap their bicycle for a larger one as it grows to expand its membership, but aims to avoid the problem of outgrown bikes cluttering up family homes. Who has this problem?
What? Where is this problem? Can you point me to like the wide ranging problem of like houses being full of bikes? That's bizarre. Again, it treats people like they're thick.
Yeah.
Like they're actually just retarded.
Oh yeah, my house is full of bikes.
Well, this just introduces the concept of these low traffic neighborhoods, the LTNs. They're not leses. Sorry, that's I got that mixed up.
So we've got the Ulez, the Kaz, the Zez, and Luton.
This is where things start to get spicy because
temper run high and low traffic zone.
Well, the low traffic zones were introduced very enthusiastically in large parts of Oxford. Again, Oxford has become this trial area for all of these.
I will notice, just as we've got the picture up here, the barriers similar to some of the ones we saw in London not too long ago, and I did notice someone making the point in chat earlier. One, if you're someone who's a postman or a delivery driver and you have to do rounds in a local area that has one of these batteries or barriers, not batteries, they've added hours to your workday because you're now going to have to go
Yeah,
round.
you've been congratulations, comrade. You've been demobilized.
And good luck being two squaddies in a big police van chasing a guy on a moped who's going to go through the terrorist barriers as you're stuck
A
behind
lot
it in
of
your big
them,
van.
when they were introduced, didn't show up on things like Google Maps.
Yeah.
I remember specifically a
I
road.
remember Panama Hat trying to order
Yes,
his food when
yes.
we went to the cathedral event in London, and he ended up out in the street shouting at some Romanian guy in a moped
because he couldn't get past all these barriers.
Oh.
They've removed the interlinks between people's streets. It will now take you 15 minutes to drive to your neighbour's house and something. Because you'll have to be forced to go via the main road. It's insanity. Everyone knows it's insanity, but this is being done, as I said, in a deliberate demobilization effort to, let's say, nudge people into not using cars. This will all become clear later. But peddling his it's narrative.
I love a good
I hate the
prog
narrative.
journal
Here we
narrative
go.
article.
Over the past 6 months across Britain, streets have been transformed into havens of cycling and walking. Where the car was once king, traffic restrictions have been imposed to cut off rat runs and give priority to active travel.
Just saying as well, when 2020 is this one from?
October.
So this is peak lockdown.
Yeah.
When they've decided to totally re-engineer cities, and they just had this article that came out a bit like, oh, it's actually just a bit low traffic.
Yeah. A lot of these appeared during lockdown, and they're causing absolute chaos in places now that people have to get to work again. There's a picture of one of these in the thumbnail of these stupid like planters that block off people's roads. That's what's happening. Can you imagine if your route to work was off this little, off the end of a junction somewhere, and you have to go the other way around across another? Like they could add half an hour onto someone. Like if you've ever commuted anywhere, you know that's true. And add half an hour onto someone's journey by doing this, and that's kind of the point.
Yeah, so almost 250 LTNs have sprung up since March, often with planters, barriers, or cameras preventing cars from entering. New cycle lanes have been laid out, pavements have been widened, and bus-only roads created.
So in congested Britain, they're just trying to make life more difficult for you to get around
by
in a car.
By actually driving people onto a smaller number of roads.
Yes.
I don't remember there actually being less cars on the road at any point.
Generally, the programme has been well received. Yeah, sure. In London, where 70 of the schemes have been implemented, polling suggests that 3 times as many people support the restrictions as oppose them. Again, we'll get to that later.
So what? 92% of people don't care, 2% support it, and 6% support it, and 2% oppose it. Then
yeah, basically, we'll get that. Study, blah blah blah. Studies, 2016 studies.
So was that 250 million quid they said this cost?
Yes.
Central government has backed the programme with 250 million of emergency investment and slimmed down statutory guidance that allows councils to accelerate the scheme's introduction. So the councils were actually unshackled during the emergency policies during COVID, and that this new Britain we're looking at is actually just a formalisation of what happened during COVID.
Yeah. Yeah, in Bromley, South London, the council leader has written to the Transport Secretary urging him to intervene over an LTN developed by neighbouring Croydon. He claims that the scheme has led to miles of traffic queues on Bromley Road. It's
like the South Park homeless people thing. You just move the traffic onto the next people.
It's amazing. These areas we made it so people couldn't drive. They didn't drive. They had to drive other places. Oh no, congestion other places. There's been a lot of public opposition, but this is about LTNs in general and about a lot of the drama surrounding them as they leave London. But this is, like I said, from October 2020.
Can we scroll down as well again? Just I noticed they had a point in here, if you just click ever so slightly, about one more, just the thing at the 2 days ago, a petition was posted on the government website calling for the national funding of LTNs to be withdrawn.
Yeah.
What does it matter? It's the local governments that are doing it. There is no national funding for LTNs.
Well, there is national funding, but there is no national requirement for them.
Yes, that's what I mean in that sense.
But there is no requirement for them. Again, this is how they get round it. When you look at the devolution of power stuff and the New Britain stuff last week, you begin to understand how this works. In that all of this will be introduced on a local level, which is actually harder to fight. If you've ever tried dealing with your local council, you will know that all of this is basically impossible to fight against. I was actually talking about this. I'm reminded of the beginning of the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, where they're trying to knock down Arthur Dent's house to make room for a bypass, right
Mm.
before Earth gets demolished to make room for a hyperspace bypass. Um, but there's that great stuff where he talks about the plans being, he gets told that plans were on display at the council office, but he says that they were in a filing cabinet in a flooded basement with no lights, in a locked filing cabinet behind a door that said "Beware of the leopard," and that's what a lot of these are like. People don't know these schemes are going on generally until like their roads blocked off
Yeah.
and there's cameras all around them, and they're trying to get to work and it's taking them half an hour because everyone's funneled towards the same
We'll
road.
we'll get to it in a bit, but that's why it was kind of funny that the low emission zone they tried around here did actually, at least for the time being, have the kibosh put on it.
Well, yeah, people got exceptionally angry about it, and I think politicians started to realize that they might be endangering their own careers in
Well, I
certain
think
ways.
also to some extent, well, if there wasn't already, or if it wasn't for the fact there was already a sort of angst here against being declared part of a certain region as opposed to the region it might have been previously, they probably wouldn't have cared as much.
Well, we'll get back onto these low traffic zones quite soon, because I get make sure we're actually on track here. Temperature on high, traffic zones. The low traffic zones were introduced in Oxford, but they've gone a step further. This is the real kind of big story here from the Sunday Times, which includes some quotes which we'll find contradict the council's own narrative on things pretty heavily. Pretty heavily, but this a strangely tepid title here from the Sunday Times saying Oxford set to cut its famous traffic jams by degrees. Here we're going to talk about the real meat and potatoes of the Oxford scheme that's got people up in arms,
Mm.
because people have put up with the low emission zone only affects buses, blah blah blah. Zero emission zone, city centre, electric cars. People kind of understand that.
But now that it's traffic as the
Yeah.
whole, it means it's
Well,
everybody.
they've got these low traffic neighborhoods already. A lot of people don't like them, but they kind of understand what's going on, kind of, because it's blocking off roads. It's inconvenient, but nobody's really being forced not to go places or being fined for leaving their own neighborhood.
Mm.
But what's happening here is, the university city will be divided into 6 districts, and motorists will get fined if they leave their neighborhood too often.
Hmm.
It's interesting, that one.
That'll need a method of enforcement, won't
Yes,
it?
it will. It's as famous as the home of Britain's oldest university and students on bicycles, but Oxford is known to its residents for its gridlock traffic. Boy, I wonder how that's got worse over the years. Now the council is fighting back with plans to divide the city into 6 districts from next August, with strict rules on how often motorists can drive outside their neighbourhood.
There we go. It's 150,000 residents will be allowed to use their cars as much as they like within their district and will be given free permits allowing them to drive out to other districts on 100 days a year. If they exceed this limit, they will be fined, possibly £7 a journey or a day.
£70
Sorry.
a journey all day, yeah. A maximum of 3 permits a household will be allowed if there are several adults with card registered to the address. So a lot of these new homes and multiple occupancy are fucked. You've got 4 people that live in a previous kind of 5-bed house. One of those people can't have a car.
That's going to become house, 12,
Yeah.
A, B,
C, D, yeah.
and E.
Yeah. The restrictions will take effect between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. 7 days a week. So not even weekends in 4 of the 6 districts, but not on Sundays in the other. Oh, it's okay. Buses, coaches, taxis, livery HTVs, motorbikes, mopeds, and bicycles will be exempt. So this is purely for private cars.
Well, see, there's one thing I think of this as well. What if you are, let's say, regardless of what the map of these districts actually looks like, because we'll get to it anyway. What if you're in the central district and in a sort of pentagonal form, you've got 5 other ones around you?
Yeah.
And you work somewhere that is beyond the limits of the district you're in and outside the outer ones. Say, for example, you live in the centre of Oxford and you work somewhere like Birmingham, somewhere further away. And you have to drive through two of these zones, 250 days a year, if not more. Of course, unless maybe if you're a teacher, you get to only do it that many days a year. But
Yeah.
there is like no, they're never going to engage in any form of mitigation to make sure that there's like a certain subset of people basically trapped in the middle of a city. Or are they just going to suck it up and pay 70 quid a day anyway?
I don't know. Again, how this scheme is going to work in practice, it's one of these things that seems deliberately unworkable, and they've kind of broken it to maybe roll back and fix it a little bit. But again, it seems like this is a permanent hamstring on people who live in any of these neighborhoods to work.
And I don't know if we want to go through, yeah. The schemes directing traffic to the ring road are already in place in the Belgian and Dutch sides of Ghent,
Here we go. The justification.
Groningen and Leuven, and there are similar proposals for inner Birmingham and Canterbury. At the heart of the plan is a desire to reduce traffic and make city living more pleasant, creating a, in quotes, 15-minute city within a small walking radius, a concept popularised during the pandemic. Enright said, it is about making sure you have the community centre, which has all of those essential needs, the bottle of milk, pharmacy, GP, schools, which you need to have a 15-minute neighbourhood. Now, this Enright character, I believe, is someone from Oxford City Council.
Yes, he is. We'll kind of get onto that in a little bit. But these, Duncan Enright is Oxfordshire City Council's cabinet member for travel and development, and he is directly quoted, as you say in that story, talking about 15-minute neighbourhoods. There's also here an Oxford Mail article which references his interview in the Times, which is entitled "Traffic Filters to Divide City into 15-Minute Neighbourhoods." So it's very clear from this that the traffic filters have a dual purpose of reducing congestion, but also a social engineering angle to them. They are meant to nudge people into staying within these little 50-minute areas in which all your services will be provided. Basically, it's the 15-minute pod.
Oh my, look at the next line though. A fleet of 159 new electric buses is expected to take the strain on less congested streets. At present, the average speed of buses on some routes is only 8 miles an hour. You might as well just have a brisk walk.
Well, that's kind of what they're saying, but it's a point of death by degrees here. But there's a lot going on here, because all of this has, of course, got people rather irate. The Oxfordshire County Council has had a huge amount of backlash. There's been a lot of headlines. You mentioned Gareth Icke. A lot of these, I hate to use the conspiracy word, but essentially crank websites. Yeah. They come across as crank websites. They're meant to feed into like the David Icke type people. And they frame this as climate lockdown. Climate lockdown's coming to Britain. Climate, you'll be locked in your home. And some of it's semi-true, and I get what they're extrapolating to, because really this is part of boiling the frog towards normalizing the idea of climate demobilization. But this is why we didn't entitle this stream Climate Lockdowns. We entitled it Demobilisation, because it's not the climate change agenda that is the goal here. The goal here is to demobilize people because they don't have enough wherewithal to keep the show going anymore. And we'll get into that more in the conclusion. But the Oxfordshire City County Council here has put out a joint statement, because really what they're doing is they're trying to frame the backlash. They're trying to foment all of this outrage, all of these people who are rightly quite alarmed that their street's been blocked off. There are cameras on the end of their road, and if they go past, 2 streets over, more than 100 days of the year, they're going to get fined for it. People are extremely worried about what's going to happen to them.
It's the perfect preemptive move to smear a protest movement.
Yes.
The same way that you couldn't be anti-vax because Piers Corbyn was, appearing at protests with folk talking about JFK Jr. and 5G and this, that, and the next thing, which meant that they were all nutters and they had perfect sort of scoping and framing to say to all the other people who were, more quote-unquote sensible anti-lockdown protests that had good optics that, actually they're just as nuts as Piers Corbyn.
Yes.
It's now the same thing if you in your local, town try and this is the thing as well, don't just think about it in terms of national news. It's very easy, say for example, in Oxford, if 30 or 40 people decided they were going to start a group, turned up to the council meetings and protested this, the council could, in theory, phone up the local papers and say, look, these people are going off the kind of nonsense that, such and
Yeah,
such is saying on this website. And this is dangerous conspiratorial language and thinking they're using about our innocent eco and traffic management policy. And you could get the whole thing shut down without even really having to make much noise about it.
No, what happened throughout November is there was a lot of local backlash. There wasn't much reporting on it, but there was a lot of local backlash that happened here. But Oxfordshire City Council on the 7th of December put out a joint statement saying staff and councillors at both councils have been subjected to abuse due to inaccurate information being circulated online about traffic filters. They're just framing this as, this is just traffic filters.
Everyone's reading Gareth Ike's articles and sending us hate mail.
There's some really just like, first point here, will traffic filters be physical barriers? No. That is deceptive, because the low traffic city stuff, the low traffic neighborhoods, are the physical barriers.
Yeah.
So there will be physical barriers just under the low traffic neighborhoods.
Not under the traffic filter system.
No, the traffic filter system doesn't have physical barriers. The other scheme has physical barriers, but not this scheme. Oxfordshire City Council's proposing to install traffic filters, 6 roads, buses. They talk about it here. Will residents be confined to their local areas? No. Here's where the direct lies come in.
The misinformation online has linked the traffic filters to the 15-minute neighbourhoods proposed on the City's Council Local Plan 2040, suggesting that traffic filters be used to confine people to their local area. This is not true. The 15-minute neighbourhoods proposal aims to ensure that every resident has all the essentials within a 15-minute walk of their home. The 15-minute walk? I thought it was 50-minute drive. 50 minutes on a bus. They don't seem to get that right either. They aim to support and add services, not to restrict them. But your own person, who's the person setting the role and remit for this plan, is describing it as a 15-minute city.
Yeah. Enright, who is the guy in charge of the scheme, he is their traffic minister, specifically mentions 15-minute neighbourhoods in the justification. It's part of the justification.
And reduce traffic.
Yes, it's part of the justification. Will Oxford residents need permission from the councillors to travel across? It's like, well, we're not locking you in your homes. We're just charging you £70 a day.
Look, no. Then they've got, everyone can go through all the filters anytime by bus, bike, taxi, scooter, or walking. Furthermore, residents will still be able to drive every part of the city at any time. But in the future, during certain times of day, you may need to take a different route.
It's all about, it's like the lockdown stuff. Well, you can leave your house.
Because there will also be exemptions to the fines for carers, blue badge holders, businesses, and emergency services. Very Schindler's List. I'm an essential worker.
Essential.
I'm an essential worker.
It's the exact same language games, but this up here is just like a lie. They're just lying here, and they're contradicting their own previous statements. But it is extremely. Oh, well, you were never locked in your home during lockdown. We're not confining people. It's the exact same language, the exact same justification. It's the exact same way of doing it. Like I said, has Oxford Council tried to secretly introduce the traffic filters? No. The concept of traffic was first introduced in 2015.
What a weird thing for a local council to write, though.
Yeah.
This sort of, rhetorical, almost like reply video style response to people that they aren't even willing to indicate, because they know if they did, they wouldn't be able to get away with the Gareth Ike style smear they're going for.
It's like, 5,700 people responded. Well, yeah, probably over 100,000 people live in these areas.
Yeah, but it's just, the concept for traffic filters was introduced in 2015. The proposals for traffic filters were first consulted on in 2019. So they spent 4 years going over the concepts, and they're willing to have it turned down. I doubt that highly.
Well, here's the final nail in the coffin, really. If you look at their own proposal here, this is their 15-minute city proposal. This is the local preferred options, 50-minute neighbourhoods.
This is the Vision 2040 Oxford. This paper focuses on the 50-minute neighbourhood city concept, so on and so forth.
Well, it's really, really bad quality because of the way that, it's public sector stuff. They're terrible.
What was the... if you could go down again?
Yeah. This one here on the left.
We're quite sorry about this, but what to focus on is not so much these green, orange,
Yeah.
and yellow zones, but
The roads.
look at the roads that can join them and the
Yeah.
thoroughfares between them. So you've got at the top here, from the toppest one to the one on the right, you've got this long extended
Yeah.
road that comes down. You've then got these 3, 4 in the middle. They're all crushed together. I've got sort of 3, 4 main vital roads that connect them all.
These are the proposed 6 50-minute city areas. These, if you look at where the roads are the proposed 6 traffic filters. They cover the main roads in and out of these 50-minute city areas, which is, it's 1-to-1, really. The exits and entrance in terms of going between these areas are being covered by these traffic filter cameras. You can't get past these choke points and go into these new 50-minute city areas. So it's, again, they mention it in their own marketing. Maybe they could say they were misquoted, but the proposals themselves interlock completely with the 50-minute.
But it's also like we're supposed to trust them.
Yes.
So like, oh well, don't you worry, because the traffic filters will not be used to enforce the 15-minute city.
Yeah.
But it's like, well, why are they on the thoroughfares? And how else would you do it without that? It's the same with oh, well, just because we want to implement UBI and also have more immigration doesn't mean we want digital ID, but the only way to make these systems work in any sort of sense that's, logical is to have something like digital ID as a sort of intermediary between the two.
Well, that's the whole point. I'll zoom out here because this is cutting it off. But AP just picked up on this story, and AP News put out a fact check saying, "Plan in Oxfordshire, England isn't a climate lockdown. Claim the county of Oxford, England, which includes the city of Oxford, is imposing a climate lockdown that will confine residents to their neighbourhoods. AP's assessment, false." They repeat the lie about 15-minute cities and this having nothing to do with 15-minute cities.
The facts. Last week, local leaders in Oxfordshire voted to try a new traffic reduction system in an effort to reduce congestion in the county's namesake city. Some on social media have since likened the scheme to stringent government COVID-19 containment policies.
Well, they do that themselves.
I know, exactly. That's what I'm saying. The 15-minute city thing is, they say it that it was popularised during COVID.
Yes, it's like Gobi News says in chat, Mott & Bailey in real time. It really is kind of Mott & Bailey.
They are going with the Mott of 15-minute cities, but the Bailey is this, or sorry, the Mott is the reducing traffic, clean air zones. But the real thing that they actually want is the full 15-minute city plan. So
we've gone from Oxford Council saying themselves that they want to create these 50-minute neighbourhoods and that the traffic plan is part of creating this, to an Associated Press fact check saying that isn't true.
By Graf Massara.
Thank you there, Graf Massara. There's also a lot of the reframing of the low traffic neighbourhoods. LTN wars, how low traffic, big bust up. A bit of battle is raging in Britain. Josh Glacey braves the front line in Oxford. This is from 2021, June 2020. Fake news, infrastructure is burning. Fake news is circulating. Allegations of bribery and corruption. There are demonstrations on the streets.
This is not Aleppo or Bogota, but the dreaming spires of Oxford. We're spitting rows over the introduction of low-traffic neighbourhoods. LTNs has escalated to the point of civil unrest.
Again, it's like, oh, why did you let them do it? It's like, well, they try not to let them do it, and this is how the news framed it. People are just like, why have you blocked off my street? I can't, I couldn't take my fridge to my neighbour's house.
Here's them saying it again. But during the pandemic, with cars idling in driveways, councils given emergency powers and government funds made available for cycling and walking schemes, the country has witnessed a surge in LTNs. So, again, it's becoming quite clear that from 2020 to now, local authorities, councils, mayoral boards, whatever you call them, were basically given free rein to apply this policy as they pleased and given a big enough kitty to do it.
The other thing as well is that the low traffic neighborhoods were implemented first.
Hmm.
And it's very, very clear if you look at the chronology here that the low traffic neighborhoods were meant to block off. They call them rat runs. Oh, people driving past people's houses too fast. But what it is to make sure you have to drive past one of these cameras.
Yeah.
What they're doing is actually blocking off anyone from creating safe routes where you cannot be monitored.
Hmm.
That's what the low traffic neighborhoods are for. They're for stopping you avoiding security cameras. What again? Why would you want hundreds of security cameras and then the blocking off of routes that mean that you can avoid the security cameras?
Yeah.
That sounds like some kind of future social credit scheme. And
Hmm.
that's very much what China has done and how China has used schemes like this to control people. And that's where this is going. For some of the change, there's been a lot of protests. They talk about them being set on fire.
That's a great image.
Yeah. Road open to blah. Basically, people are sick of it and they just want to be able to get round. And this is very deliberately just nakedly making it harder to get round. And a lot of people's streets have been closed while they've been installing
Oh
them.
no! Wait, scroll down here for a
Yeah.
second. We've been treated with contempt, rages Dogar, suggesting the area's large Muslim community has been trampled over. Oh, so the community that was in civil unrest about this wasn't your average Oxford citizen,
Yeah.
it was the Muslim community. We're cannon fodder to these people. They imagine some utopia where every fucker is walking or on a bike. Not going to happen, man. It's pissing down with rain about 9 months of the year, he says. Then we'll see how fun it is to cycle everywhere. This is England, not California. And it isn't fucking...
Islamabad either, yeah.
No, exactly. Campaigning alongside Maz is Chloe Clark's a local mother of two who's disabled and suffers from incurable inflammatory arthritis. She says the traffic from the LTNs has effectively forced her to continue COVID-19 isolation. So the low traffic neighbourhoods are causing more traffic.
Well, yeah, like I
It's
said,
like the war on drugs. It's the war on traffic.
Yeah. Like, I can't cycle and I can't do what I want to do. I can afford the extra fuel costs. Yeah, my journey time have at least doubled.
Oh no, but she's okay though. I understand we're in a climate emergency and we need to cut air pollution. There are better ways
limited
of
hangouts.
doing this. Oh god!
But it's all a limited hangout. But yeah, the low traffic neighborhoods had a huge.
It keeps going. It just gets better and better.
Yeah.
Unlike less tangible upheavals such as Brexit, these changes have immediate daily effects on everybody they touch. Will the burden of transforming our society fall fairly? Who will these changes be made by and who for? How much of a say will any of us have? Oh, so it's not that these policies are wrong and don't work, it's that they're not democratic and green enough.
Yeah, they're not everyone's not sharing the pain.
How we all rub together in this crowded little island, it's sickening.
Well, there's again the Telegraph police called. It's now talking about police action in abuse reaction to council's climate lockdown traffic schemes. They talk about conspiracy theorists and extreme abuse and death threats.
Would scroll up again?
Yeah.
Draconian plans to divide Oxford residents into 6 climate zones have led to council chiefs calling the police over extreme abuse in the UK. First, the city will be carved into 6 districts. The traffic filters come as Oxford City Council and Oxfordshire County Council hope to become a 15-minute city. 15-minute city. Excuse me.
That's a conspiracy theory.
Yeah, they're lying.
Yeah, David Icke.
Excuse me, AP.
Yes,
Might have a word.
Where's my fact check? I demand a fact check. Fact check this man. Boo this man. Let me double check. Again, 1,000-sign petition. Blah 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 blah. They'll be fined £70. It's again £6.5 million to install 6 cameras.
Is it worth a way to the point where we maybe want to go a bit more into what the 15-minute city is, or?
Yes.
God, there's so many of these about the just torrents of abuse.
It's funny because they talk about 15-minute cities in here, the conspiracy theory stuff, but Oxford Mail themselves put forward the 15-minute city line, so that seems a bit. I wanted to make a quick point here that a lot of this is advocated for by these weird, like, local pressure groups with these, like, paedophile-looking anoraks.
Excuse me, this is the Advocacy for Livable Streets and Spaces organisation?
Yeah.
Who are these people sponsored by? Let's just go to the bottom
I
of the
couldn't
page.
find anything about it. Apparently, they're just a local group. It says it doesn't actually say
Or
where
is it
they get
like
their
a
support from. Yeah.
tributary of the council or something like that?
Well, I wanted to go through kind of a second example here.
Can do.
There's a on the wrong thing here. There's a second example outside of Oxford, an even bigger one, which is the Greater Manchester Clean Air Zone, which has been put on hold after massive backlash. But we'll just go through what that is first. Um, like many of the other ones, this
You know,
is
try sideways next up. I think or third.
there we
Well, maybe just I noticed it in the notes as well before this section at the point that you'd made. I know it's something we've laboured already,
yeah
but in theory, the climate emergency is over.
yeah.
We have clean air. Did they take the cameras down?
That's a good point. No, the Bury Council here is actually kind of throwing the government under the bus here. It says, like many areas across the country, we have illegal levels of air pollution on
Also,
local roads.
pollution is illegal now. It is
Yes,
illegal to pollute.
across all 10 local authority areas in Greater Manchester. This affects everyone's health, particularly the most vulnerable people in our society. COVID line again. Because of this, Greater Manchester is under a government legal direction to implement a Category C charging clean air zone. So here we see like the hand of power. It's just like they've given them a legal direction to implement it, but they've not told them how. And the actual tyranny itself will look like or seem to be coming from the local government and council, which is very hard to hold to account.
But it's all right though, because most vehicles are not affected. As
Yeah.
private cars, mopeds, or motorbikes are not included
Yeah.
for now.
For now. We've seen how this progression goes. That's why I wanted to belabor this point. So Greater Manchester as a whole, as a county, we will see just how massive this scheme is. But as a county, they're trying to create a clean air zone all around it. Basically create a prison county. If you're a driver, that is. But it's funny how they have to admit here that this is where it's kind of the council going, we're not doing
Look
this.
at
Please
them.
stop shouting at us.
Air pollution is a public health crisis linked to a range of very serious health conditions and contributes towards 1,200 deaths a year in Greater Manchester. Excuse me, have you got a source for that?
Contributes towards.
Uh,
There's about 7 million people in Greater, maybe 6 million people maybe in Greater
I
Manchester.
thought that sounds like a lot.
It does include Manchester as well.
No.
1,200 deaths a year. Contributions, kind of nothing. There's probably more people who die from like suffocating themselves with their underpants by accident. That kind of population.
I
size.
wonder how high that rates on the beanbag death index.
The beanbag. I remember the whole thing about beanbags being deadly. But yeah, Greater Manchester Clean Air Zone is a Category C charging clean air. Kind of funny how it's categorized. But the scheme has been suspended, let's say. But there's already been the cameras installed. We already have, like, here it is. Map shows where 800 clean air zone cameras across Greater Manchester are due to be installed as relevant schemes continue.
So, like Oxford Council,
Yeah.
Greater Manchester is being transparent by
Yeah.
installing all the cameras and the signs and then putting in the legislation and totally not switching on the cameras until the legislation's been passed.
Yes. The enforcement cameras are already in place. That's the point of this. And to just kind of show the point of just how many there are. This isn't Greater Manchester isn't the biggest area. Here it is with the rest of Britain. It's a sizable area. It's not massive, but just look at all these cameras. It's not even just central Manchester. It's everywhere. It's right out over every main road. And if you look at this map,
Well, yeah, this is the thing we did the other day. Maybe
Yeah.
if we go to like this section here for Rochdale, pull
Yeah.
out a bit,
yeah,
maybe another level, you can see you've got, your
What-
main roads.
yeah,
And that these cameras, of course, because they're to do with traffic, follow the rings of the main road.
Yep.
But what that would mean is your section of Rochdale that's sectioned out by the yellow A road here comes your 15-minute city.
yes,
And the ring of cameras on the smaller A roads outside of it become your next bit. And then you've got this place down here, Milne Road, that has its own little ring of cameras around it.
you can kind of see that the population centers here are, especially if you go out more into the rural areas, if you kind of go towards where like Wigan is, you can kind of see that these areas will be made into these 15-minute city areas. It's weird seeing these like rings of cameras here, but you begin to see it when you see like there's like Wigan town centre and places like that. Even places like rural, which are quite rural. You see every major road here has one of these little traffic cameras. But this is going to be all of these going to become these little. It's kind of it's very clear as to what these cameras are for. And again, the usage of the cameras can change. It is not purely static with the whole clean air zone thing. These can be used for anything, as is being shown by this story here. BBC, Greater Manchester Clean Air Zone, cameras to monitor vehicles.
Well, they're going to use them to solve crimes, of course.
Yeah. The police are going to have access to them, obviously, because the police need access to 800 monitoring cameras. Just the scale of it is insane. But yeah, traffic camera set up as part of the Greater Manchester Clean Air Zone again, are set to be turned to collect collect information in the region. It's very general. They're talking about it almost like it's a car survey, like it's a traffic survey, but it's very very clear that they just want means to be able to track people. This is a tracking scheme, and if you don't think that all of this is being fed to some giant GCHQ computer in which they triangulate everybody's movements and try to build up like social patterns of everyone in Britain, you're extremely naive.
What's Andy Burnham saying at the bottom here?
This.
Andy Burnham said the government needs to think about the clean air zone in a completely different way. We need to do this without threatening jobs or businesses. We want to see complete minimization with regards to charging, if not the complete avoidance of it altogether. Yeah, stop poking the bear too much. People are getting annoyed.
Yeah, the controversial clean air zone scheme originally proposed that high emission vehicles would pay a daily charge ranging from £7.50 to £60, while private cars would not have to pay. Again, for now, but it's you would essentially, we didn't talk about it when we talked about Oxford, but let's talk about it now. If you run a small business in Oxford or Greater Manchester, and in the these cameras come online in Oxford as they will do, or they come online in Greater Manchester, you're done. Like your business is done. What like?
Well, you could of course buy an EV van.
Yeah.
And then you can maybe do 100 miles in a day if you wanted.
Yes.
At most. And then you're now out of work because you've got to charge your van and your house for the next 12 hours. And as electricity prices are going at the moment, for most EVs, especially ones that you'd be using not on a super like hyper miling kind of way, the cost per mile is pretty much the same as a relatively efficient petrol or diesel.
Yes, it is.
So it's still going to cost you an arm and a leg, and you're now even more hampered than you were before.
What I want to point out about the Oxford scheme as well is that this, and the low traffic neighborhoods concept in general, is that neither of these are targeted towards, making people buy electric cars. As we'll come to a little bit later, these are really just the reduction of the use of personal vehicles, period. It doesn't matter if it's an electric car you're traveling into your neighbouring 50-minute city in Oxford, you'll still be charged. And that's very telling. That's very telling that this is not purely about the green transition. This is about demobilisation itself. This is about preventing people from using cars, even if they are electric cars.
Well, it's something we've kind of talked about with people before as well, and I've always joked that, we'll be lucky to have a bike as we cycle between the dirt farms.
Yeah.
And like people are, oh no, the elites won't do that. Why would they want to demobilise everyone? They get really angry and annoyed. It's like, well, no, they do want to demobilise people.
What are they going to do about it?
You can't make everyone take an EV car because there's not enough nickel in the ground. There's not enough copper, and they don't care.
Yeah,
they're just going to do it.
We're not all going to get EVs. All the people who are like, we can't just replace all cars with EVs. That won't work. No, it won't work. You just won't have a car. Like, that's what's happening. And it's very clear from these demobilisation schemes that that's what's happening. But we do have quite a decent amount more to cover, so I'm going to try and get through this at pace here, because there's a lot of it to go on to.
Or Manchester Clean Air Zone stuff. Skip that.
We can skip that, yes.
Where we can quickly look at the 15-minute city, which we've talked about before, but you did find some nice sources on this. You might want as well slide the thing over.
I'm not. That's just it's the Orbell Award the Henrik Frodo Orbel Foundation, who's probably like worked for IG Farben or some shit.
Oh, aye.
He definitely gassed some people. But here's the 15-minute city at a glance. Here's what the actual concept of the 50 minutes. There's a great little bit here. It says the 50-minute city is a term coined in 2016 by Carlos Marino, scientific director and professor specializing in complex systems and innovation at University of Paris. Oh, sounds terrible. The term covers an urban theory and an urban model that cities can use to ensure that all residents are able to access their daily needs: work, housing, food, health, education, and culture and leisure within the distance of a 15-minute walk or bike ride. So it's not a 15-minute journey in general. It's now a 50-minute walk. It's an even smaller
50-minute walk or bike ride. Those are a big difference.
Yeah, there is a big difference.
Is it like somebody's like mum foot up the street cycling 15 minutes, at which point it's a mile, or is it the guy who's a keen cyclist up the street who can do a few miles in 15 minutes? That makes a big difference. But the thing that struck me as well, when we were looking at 15-minute city stuff.
C40 cities promote the 50-minute city idea as a blueprint for post-COVID-19 recovery.
But not only is it dripping in a formalization of the sort of lockdown segmenting of cities and local areas.
Yeah.
It is a perfect formalization or product, as it were, of the minimum infrastructure guarantee that we looked at in the New
Britain stuff,
New Britain document the other week, which stated that within certain subset districts of local councils or localities, whatever name they want to give to them, that there must be a minimum guarantee of housing, of health, of work, of leisure, of education, exactly as they're saying here. So, of course they can't then, I think, for a number of reasons, just say, oh, well, everyone across the UK has the minimum infrastructure guarantee. Yeah. They're going to have to do it by segments. And if they've already segmented up, councils and towns by low traffic neighbourhoods or 15-minute neighbourhoods or 15-minute cities, they've already got, their District 1, District 2, District, 6 districts of Oxford. They've already got their however many segments they can cut Manchester into, with these 800 cameras as waypoints between.
Well, something I'm going to go into at a future point is this has a lot of stems for a lot of future streams, really, is that this concept already existed. It was called a village.
Yeah.
And it was completely smashed by the town planners of the 1950s and 60s in post-war.
Also, the implementation of supermarkets.
Yes.
And shopping centres.
Yes. And out-of-town shopping centres.
Killed the local high street.
Yes. This already existed in the before time. This is a modern problem. They are building like a village simulacrum. And they talk about work, housing, food, health, education, culture, and leisure. There's an implication here, though, that you will have all of these in your local area that you will be assigned, and you won't be able to use.
Well, it's your minimum infrastructure guarantee.
You also won't be able to use other people's.
No.
If you're on the edge of a 15-minute city and your usual doctor's surgery is in a neighbouring 15-minute city, tough. You will use what you are assigned. And if you have what the government classes as your minimum infrastructure within your 15-minute city, why would you be allowed a car? Why do you need a car, Conrad? Everything you need is here.
Yeah,
exactly. No, your local health service is meeting its statutory requirements. Why would you need to go outside of it? You can't seek a better standard of healthcare in a neighbouring city. You're not allowed that. That will cost too much carbon. That's really where this is going, in that if they say you have everything you need within a 15-minute walk of wherever your domicile is, you will not be allowed out of that, and you will not be allowed to seek services outside of that.
Yes.
And this is all happening really because they don't know how to provide the standard of living anymore that was expected in the post-war West.
Yeah.
This really is about the amount of people and the amount of management that goes on. They have decided they are no longer willing or able to provide you with even some facsimile of what we might call the American dream or whatever it is, of post-war settlement. That it's much easier as a managed unit for the managerial class to create these areas where you can't escape because it makes the spreadsheet easier. Like the tyranny is that simple. It makes the spreadsheet easy. And
yeah, the way they frame this one, a return to the 15-minute neighborhood.
yeah, your view. This is again. We've come back to Oxford here. The Coalition for Healthier Streets.
I believe you find that's the COSET.
Yeah, is inviting people living in Oxford to take part in a survey about the everyday amenities they would like most to have within walking distance of where they live. What bizarre NGO is this coming from? But the recent lockdowns led many of us to reassess our travel habits and take a fresh look at our local neighbourhoods, the amenities we have within closer reach of our home.
Yeah, with more of us now working from home more often, we've also increasingly come to appreciate the importance of our local community and nearby green spaces for our physical and mental well-being.
Good lord. The concept of the 50-minute neighborhood is that the amenities that are most important to you within a 50-minute walk of your house, and that you won't be able to use any others. A step back. Here's the framing. Here's like the return angle. It's bizarre. Long-time Headington residents know the concept of 50-minute neighborhoods is nothing new. The history section of Headington News documents a large variety of shotless amenities that were once dotted around Headington streets. What destroyed them? Central planning, like communist level central planning in the 70s did.
The next.
Yeah.
One resident told us that Rumbelows on the London Road once lent her a trolley so she could wheel her new fridge home. It's like when you used to have a Curry's in your local town. Remember the 1990s?
Yeah.
It never used to be anything unusual to walk around the corner to buy daily supplies, but as amenities become increasingly spread out and we started to drive to shops further away, we just started.
Yeah, all these things just happened. Local communities weren't deliberately smashed by central government to create these new towns and create these commuter belts and to create a car-centric economy.
The comment, I can't wait for Northwest Zone 1Z FC versus Northwest Zone 4 AFC. That's going to be a cracker, that.
But this is really just, again, another NGO putting forth the idea that, livable streets, we're going back to villages. When really they have degraded the world so much, they're going to build you a fake pod village.
So Oxford has, at this point, we've seen two separate, weird
pressure organizations, yeah.
And then you found this one, which I thought was hilarious.
God. Yeah, during the pandemic, the BBC created a vertical called the 2-meter economy. And the 2-meter economy is this the supermarket of the future? The city that became an open-air cafe. But the one I want to talk about here is the plan to create 50-minute cities. Because again, this is one of the more revealing ones here. A new urban planning model would change the French capital. It's how 50-minute cities would change the way we socialize. Great template, stronger local communities and make residents happier. They really, the framing of this as well is through the lockdowns.
The conveyor belt of choice.
Yes.
Sorry, the conveyor belt of choice can crash into a halt with the coronavirus pandemic, but for Fraileoli, the 2-month lockdown that began on the 2-month lockdown, I think it was a bit bloody longer than that.
Well, this is from January 2021.
That began on 17th March, confining her to a 1-kilometre radius of her home. God, people, no wonder the Yellow Vest protests were lively. Gave her a nuanced, enriching view of her neighbourhood. I discovered it's possible to feel like you're in a small village in Paris, she says. To get to know your neighbours, to maintain good links with shopkeepers, to favour local craftsmen shops over large supermarkets. I even joined the citizens movement. Prepare food baskets for homeless people. I thought I would have a hard time living the lockdown, but I was perfectly at home in a quiet place.
She's not the only one that felt this. Oh God, it's so obvious.
I'm sorry, but actually take your conveyor belt of choice, fucking swivel on it.
It's exceptionally obvious that they are gearing up for lockdowns of some kind in the future with this.
Oh, aye, look.
Yeah.
Valentin Jedzorazg, a 25-year-old civil servant living in the south of Paris. It led me to crisscross the small streets of my district more than usual. Stop using the rat runs, you dirty traffic.
Yeah. It's a whole thing of it's just like I was confined within one.
Life in prison is great. I even joined the prison gang.
Yeah, it really is that. They're actually selling us like pod propaganda.
Now you get like the ones just now, and I see them everywhere. It's like the TikToks of like what it's like to be a 23-year-old PR exec at Meta. And it's like, get up, go to work.
I 15 rounds of kale salad.
Eat avocado toast, work out, have a cool lunch, go shopping. There's going to be like, what it's like to live in the 15-minute district of Paris.
No, wait, those, I think those already exist.
That's what we're reading.
I was confined to a 1 kilometer radius of my house
and
by the government.
I've never felt so liberated.
It's just like, okay, you're just gonna like lead on that. It's like, yeah, the French government confined me to a 1 kilometer radius of where I live legally.
Anyway, please take this away so we can get on to the next thing.
Oh God, yeah. I just thought it was funny that there's HSBC here. Oh God, they've nixed it. It's gone. Maybe I just misclicked there, but I find
Need
this.
to scroll down a bit.
Yeah. Sorry, we're in the document here. So with
HSBC shilling 50 cities in Saudi. Yes, I remember because you showed this to me the other day, and it's gone.
It's good. They got rid of it here. Let me see if there's an archive of this. I'll do this in real time here. But this is.
Don't show people how to do this. They'll do it instead of us.
God damn it! No. Yeah. Sorry. There's no. I forgot to. This is why you archive everything.
I think you can't find an older version of that through the archive thing.
I'll attempt to in a second. Give me a. I'll probably be able to find it to the Wayback Machine.
You also got the document on stream. Your spoilers.
But yeah, there's. Oh God, go to some Wikipedia style. What's here? He's been grabbed. Oh, there we go. May to come up here.
Oh no! What are you telling me? Wayback Machine doesn't have this page either. Try and take the recent one from November.
Sorry about this, guys. Kind of an error for the servers. God damn it. Okay, I can't grab this one.
The Hong Kong Shanghai Bank has made sure it wants to advertise to Western stakeholders about the importance of a 15-minute city in the post-COVID world. I think was something along the lines of the line they had.
Well, they also were shilling Saudi Arabia as a top-line example of the 15-minute city. But where all this is coming from, and where all this really begins, and you get into the meat of what's really going on, is the net zero principles for successful behavior change initiative.
I just did two super chats. We've got there's some great ones. Glow in the dark, giving us $5. The saying seems to be true. If you want to live in a safe, secure city without worry, you'll have a prison or a zoo. The new surf class. Melon must be frustrating to be so right so early. If only you knew.
If only you knew. Yes. But this, you begin to get into the nudge unit stuff here. For those of you who don't know, the nudge unit is essentially a psyop operation set up by the UK government to nudge, in quotes, people through social engineering into behaviors that they find in some way preferable.
Well, yeah, it's like it's like managerialism formalized into something deeper, because the joke is that the job of a manager is to make people do things they don't want to do.
Yes.
So the job of the managerial class is to make a society do as it doesn't want to.
But thank you for the super chats and stuff, guys. That's it is very helpful. Give me a second. There's some audio here we can talk about. I think I accidentally closed one of them.
No, they're still there.
No, there's. I closed the link
right.
for this. How that got away, but it did. Weird redirect stuff going on here, but
yeah,
this is from
nudge to net zero.
This is from a place called the Behavioral Insights team, and this is a podcast called "Can We Nudge to Net Zero?" And it includes the person we'll be hearing here is Nobel Prize-winning Professor Richard Thaler.
Who, if you study any stuff about behavioral economics, is he is a household name within that subject.
Yes. We also checked his early life, and it checks out. That's all I'll say. But I'll just play the clip here because it is relatively amazing. I'd encourage anyone who's got the time to listen to both of these.
We sat and listened to them the other day when we were cooking.
Yes.
And it is some of it's kind of thigh slapping funny because they're talking about, oh god, I've realized is that something they've done in the replication crisis down there on the right? We'll have to give that a check at some point. It's so transparent that you're like, I can't believe they're actually saying this.
It's here's Richard. Here's Richard, Nobel Prize winning Richard.
The other point I will make, and this is something that we stress in the new version of Nudge, Bill Nordhaus's idea of so-called climate clubs, though both Cass and I are not sure that that's the best name for them, but the Paris Accord is sort of a climate club. And the research by Ernst Fair and Simone Gachter shows that if you give people the opportunity to punish, then you get more cooperation in so-called public goods games. So if somebody's free riding, people will selflessly go out of their way to punish the bad actors. And I think that is going to have to be an essential part of Paris Accord 2. Countries will be under great pressure to go along, but what are they go along with? If it's some goal for 2050, then that's not going to help. We need goals for 2022 and 2023, and we need the ability to punish people who aren't making progress every step of the way.
See, that is such an amazing clip.
He's describing the climate Pol Pot position to the current climate Maoism we have now. No, we need vanguard groups who get to say what the standard is, and they get to punish people that don't meet it. No. And earlier on in this same podcast, they talk about how we ran these test groups where we took a street of people and we made everyone display at the end of the month their energy usage relative to their neighbours, and that you take that with the other so that you have climate vanguards that can punish people who are monitoring streets, making sure that people are conscious of how much energy their neighbours are wasting.
Oh God, they talk about like neighborhood struggle sessions they have with people, but that clip there, no, he doesn't say, he's referring to it like it's countries, but he's not. He's saying people. Yeah, he's saying we need the ability to punish people who are not with us every step of the way, and we need to be able to punish them not in the future but now. Yes, it's such an amazing clip. There's a second clip here which is more to do with the demobilization and car stuff here from a podcast called "Decarbonizing Our Food, Transport, and Energy." But there's just some hilarious word games here.
Absolutely. And I think, you mentioned there the sort of battle on the car, and the proverbial war on motorists is, of course, most politicians' worst nightmare and not something they want to engage with. But do you think that's what's necessary? Because I feel like we are pushing uphill a bit here. The car is just so convenient. It's become a very strong default in many people's lives. And I think we often face these sort of first mile problems where, picking up your car key as you leave the house is the easiest thing to do, even if 20 minutes later, you're going to be stuck in some congestion. Whereas getting your bike out the shed or walking to the bus stop in the rain and so on is obviously far less appealing. So what's needed there? Do we need to make driving somehow less appealing in order to compete?
Yeah, I think so. But I suppose that the key thing to keep in mind is that this should not be seen and perceived as a war against cars and against motorists. And what that means
it's proverbial terms there, should not be seen and perceived. It's like irrespective of whether or not it is.
It's like, well, yes, we need to make driving less appealing in quotes, and we need to have a war on motorists. but it shouldn't be seen as one. We need to make sure it is not seen and perceived that way, which is such political talking. Another donation here from Golden the Dark saying, Mao's climate continuous revolution is here. We as you said, we might have moved past Mao's climate resolution.
We're into the Pol Pot guards of
the Khmer Green.
Oh no, it is very that, because I think about the way that kids are being taught it in school. They are being primed in the same way that we've talked about the Rainbow Rouge.
Yeah.
It isn't so much about the effective application of carbon mitigation. It's about turning children into political zealots who will, turn on their parents and their forebearers for not engaging in eco-friendly policy.
There's all this
behavior.
discussion about kids grooming kids, LGBT grooming kids, and nobody is focusing on the climate stuff that they're being like fire hosed.
Well, that's the thing as well, is much in that sort of Gareth Icke style. People are like, oh, it's an eco death cult, but it's that they're not thinking about the ramifications of what if it's not about cultish behavior that's obvious. What if it's about, in the same way that a lot of the HR stuff has come through LGBT crap, is, well, there's actually going to be a lot of boring people demonstrating academic papers and talking on podcasts that people will never read or they'll never listen to. They won't know about it, and all of a sudden, as has happened in certain areas in Britain, signs will be thrown up, cameras will be thrown up, policy will be put forward, and then you're either going to suck it up or you're going to pay a fortune.
Well, there's somebody we know, we won't name them for privacy reasons, who takes a lot of surveys and does a lot of polling to try and see what's coming down the pipeline. And they've been provided with this kind of situation, I think it was 6 months ago. And before that, I think they were presented with stuff like this before. But within research, they've been putting out feelers for climate lockdowns specifically for a long time. It's a survey, it's a situation to reduce carbon emissions. Your government banned people from driving to work in this part of the city in the past. That is, your government forbade the use of... It is on the right thing. A collapse watch, yes. Government forbade you the use of your car to commute to work in 1 year ago. It's stupid because it plugs in the time in the past. It makes it sound really clunky, but that's just the way that the formulaic kind of survey stuff works. But they've been asking people about this for quite a long time. It's interesting that people would be asked what their opinion on ban people from driving to work. It's not even like, oh, unnecessary car journeys. It's like, no, you've been banned from driving to work. You will work from home. And they're putting out feelers about that. But like I said, the demobilization is the point, in my view. The nudge unit stuff, though, to sum that up, the nudge units, they when you listen to these, they really conclude that you begin with framing certain activities as good and bad. You good code and bad code thing. Then encourage good behavior with carrots, e.g. bus passes, electric vehicle subsidies. You then use soft power to shame the bad behaviors. On
a deeper level, the whole premise and everything they say carries this assumption with it.
Yeah.
They know the public does not want these measures.
Yes.
They know the public isn't even receptive to these measures and would reject them if they were just delivered to them straight. So they have to engage in obfuscation.
Yes.
They have to engage in policies that in a roundabout way get them what they want.
Yes.
So they don't just hit you with the climate lockdowns. You have low traffic neighborhoods and clean air zones, and they stack on top these little measures bit by bit.
What happens is your low emission zone becomes ultra low emission. The ultra low emission zone then contains low traffic neighborhoods. Your low traffic neighborhoods then inform the boundaries of a 15-minute neighborhood, which has like explicit demobilization. And that is where we are now.
Well, because they don't have to fine you for leaving your 15-minute neighborhood, because they'll fine you for leaving your low traffic neighborhood.
Yeah. Well, these two things aren't connected. We've split.
No, they're not at all.
We've split Oxford into 6 50-minute cities, and we've installed 6 traffic cameras on the main roads between those 6 50-minute cities, which will fine you for moving between them. But this isn't any kind of demobilization effort. It's kind of insane that they would say that, but anyway. And then the final step, really, as we've seen, is to use hard power to punish the bad behaviors, like personal vehicle. And there's other bits in the decarbonization of transport. It basically says, yes, we're lying to people about the electric car stuff. They go over the fact that people aren't going to be able to have cars because it's viable. But there are other pieces of propaganda in the media about demobilization. The big one is the 4-day work week thing, which is, anyone who's worked in industry knows that's hilarious. Like, a 4-day work week doesn't work in manufacturing. You'd either have to hire more people or cut production or cut shifts. It doesn't, like, it's so counterintuitive. It also, like, most people have pretend jobs.
What I was just going to say as well is that you can tell by the picture below and the physiognomies included within that these people don't have real jobs. Of course, they would rather work 4 days than 5 because they do not have a value output that they have to make up that would require 5 days of work.
No.
Whether they do 4 days or 5 days of email shuffling doesn't make a blind bit of difference to everybody else.
No, the 4-day work week is really, a lot of this demobilization stuff is about admitting that the busy work, that managerial society, like,
there's also way too much genes going on in that picture.
Yeah, there are far too many genes. It's about admitting that the fake work that has been given to people to pacify them is consuming too many resources. These people are a net negative on, like, the macroeconomic managerial system.
They're actually, the regime in a roundabout way is curtailing its unproductive work by telling them they don't have to work as much anymore.
Well, the end point of all of this is obviously, like, UBI.
Yeah.
Like, that's where this is going. You're going to be confined to your 50-minute neighborhood where you can't find work. There's no work there. You will have to access all these services. You won't be allowed to have a car. But what you will be allowed is something like UBI. But it's very, very clear that they're going, oh shit, we have all these people.
I'm sure your UBI will only be available to spend within your 50 minutes.
Neighborhood. Yeah, within your 50 minutes, because it'll be a digital currency. And
the blockchains for your local carbon credits will only work within stores of the same blockchain.
I thought that was obvious.
I think we actually covered that before.
Yeah, we did.
With was it a Monero program they piloted somewhere in Florida where they specifically said they would use local crypto and blockchain networks to facilitate more local commerce.
It's the big thing here that it's so obvious that 4 days of work is less productive than 5 days of work if you have a real job.
Yeah.
If you have to deliver results in a timely manner, you have to be there to do your job.
Imagine number of people are going to have to. Well, see, you can't even do like 4 12-hour shifts anymore because they would argue that's too many hours to work in a week.
Yeah, it is. But it's the whole point is that you will be demobilized and all of these fake jobs will be taken out of the economy. But a lot of real jobs will go with them, is the issue. They don't really have the wherewithal or power to do this. It's all going to go horribly wrong. I don't want to talk about this aspect of it too much, but the 15-minute cities very much resemble the tower blocks. The tower blocks, the nightmarish socialist housing developments in the 1960s, were meant to be this.
Yep.
They were meant to be walkways in the sky, cities in the sky.
A village in an acre footprint.
Yes. That is how they were sold as social engineering, they were sold as a utopian future, and they utterly failed. When they say 15-minute city, what they really say is ghetto. And that's very, very obvious here. But yeah, the 4-day work week is another kind of telltale sign of the demobilization. I also want to briefly mention, this is for The Economist. They have an entire vertical that we're going to use for so much content because it's amazing, their impact of it, which is horrendously optimized for mobile, as in it's optimized for mobile to the detriment of desktop. But this is from their blog about something called, it's by Susan Paulson, professor at the Center for Latin American Studies, University of Florida, and co-author of The Case for Degrowth. What does Latin American Studies tell you about economics? Maybe she can dance in like salsa, who the fuck knows? But really, this, again, degrowth is one of the big headline terms of the demobilization, the de-GDPifying.
I think the to go into the degrowth thing more, I think when because we have another, and we'll get into it in a second, thing we're planning to cover in future, which would be the new builds for New Britain.
Yes. We'll talk about a little bit. I'd like to fold it into something. I don't know. There's other stuff that the degrowth stuff goes into as well because it's its own thing. But degrowth is part of this whole demobilization. But as a lead in to next week's stream and to talk about more of how devolved tyranny
I'm
works.
not sure if that'll be next week, mind. It will be Boxing
Oh,
Day.
sorry. Not next week. Next time we do one of the more in-depth streams. Probably in January. This is our next kind of planned issue stream. Is that as well as the local tyranny involved with demobilization, low traffic zones, essentially what are becoming or will become what people talk about as climate lockdowns, even though that term is being deliberately used to poison the reality of this bureaucratic web of nightmare demobilization. The net zero stuff, specifically the decarbonization and the removal of gas in homes, which is being pushed very, very heavily, first of all, by the devolved assembly of the SNP. And that's really how they're getting around this. It's not central government is doing it as well, but local authorities and specifically the SNP and the devolved government installment are doing this much faster and with much more abandon for people's health, let's say, than the rest of the UK is. There's a Scottish Daily Express talking about SNP and Greens plan to ban gas boilers could mean soaring
I think
house
we could skip the need to read any of the things that these articles and just I could maybe relay onto the audience that your new favourite pastime is on cold, damp evenings at about 7:30, 8 o'clock after everyone's had the dinner, is to go on to Twitter and look up heat pump condensation issues.
Oh, heat pump defrost cycle.
The heat pump.
It's not providing any heat. It's just going through defrost cycles.
And there's just
we've gone down from 19 to 16 degrees indoors.
Threads and threads of people who's not only struggling to keep their house both dry and warm, but not being helped by the fact that local governments and local districts are able to shut off their heat pumps due to high energy consumption, because it turns out these energy efficient heat pumps aren't very energy efficient.
No, that's a big thing. We'll talk about that on a later date, but there's a whole quagmire of stuff coming up with what they refer to as district and community heating, which is going to get extremely deadly in the future. that's going to get really, really, really bad. But the heat pump and the requirement, the airtight house, really is the big thing we're going to talk about during the new build stream. Because oh boy, is the airtight house a terrible idea. How many
people are they accidentally gonna red pill when building new houses? Oh yeah, we've got these lovely doors to put in the house in the well, you can't put those on there. They're not airtight.
Oh, we're kind of doing our own. It's the new build calculation. Yes. Do we have anything else to go over here? Then we could maybe do a bit of a shilling at the end. We've covered a lot in a small amount of time. I just want to say that I want to stress that this is very much linked to the stream we did last week.
Yes.
That they are performatively devolving powers and then using these new devolved places, these new devolved assemblies, to push in their name all of these measures on you. That you won't be dealing with the central fist of local government.
No.
You'll be dealing with the opaque, bumbling hand of local councils, to which you have actually less levers to pull to object, because local councils are just notorious, as I said earlier, for being resistant to any kind of sense. To re-go over some of our shilling, thank you to people who donated. I'll just double check and make sure we haven't missed any. I don't think we have, though. No. Oh yes, actually, Eth's no. That's 2 weeks ago. I'm looking too far back there. Now we are on Telegram. If you've clicked the link below, we are on. Well, I'm on Twitter currently, but shush. I'm not really on Twitter. That's run by my media intern.
Yes.
We have the anti-politics Substack, as I said, and the next time you will see us, I can actually probably, yeah. Normally, I'll put it in the chat here. Sorry, I'm just bumbling around. We'll be on Millennial Woes channel on Wednesday. On the Millennial, that's the next time you'll see us outside of our own channel. Although we will have hopefully some guests on in January. I don't want to announce those yet because they're not fully confirmed yet.
We'll see how it goes.
We're busy. Yes, the next time you'll see us on our own stream will be on the 28th. We'll be doing a community stream, so do come along. I'll inform all our members about that a couple days before.
Make sure to bring all your Christmas money and give us super chats.
Please bring on your Christmas money. People say it's unfortunately at the moment. We don't mean to depress people. We're just trying to let people know it's difficult to unpick a lot of the David Icke style headlines, and I think that's on purpose. If you see alarmist stuff, that conspiracy jackets, what is essentially very, very basic local bureaucracy that builds and builds and builds on itself. We've gone over this purely by using their own framework.
Yeah.
And purely by showing some of the lies in their own framework and their own framing, the way they talk about themselves. We have not used any of these alarmist sources. We have purely used the councils on proposals and mainstream news sources and people like the Behavior Insights Unit. They can explain this to you themselves if you let them. They just have it in a diffuse way where you have to be a slight insider to know what's going on. And to know what's going on, you usually have to like or be disposed to like what's going on. We're just kind of gathering it all in one place. But it's deliberately difficult to do because, like I said, the low traffic neighborhoods and the traffic filters and the 15-minute city stuff are all, on paper, separate proposals. But they are all part of a greater web of demobilization. And again, to belabor the final point here, all of this is being done because the people in charge, our current elites, cannot give you a standard of living. They cannot allow people to be mobile. They cannot allow all these people with fake jobs to go on 2 holidays a year. There's not the resources for it. It doesn't make sense. It's nothing to do with preserving the planet or climate change. They simply can't keep the show going.
It's about not having the wheels fall off the thing horrendously.
Yes. They are degrading your rating as an economic unit. Is what's going on within the ranking of their system.
Homo economicus status lowered.
And they are going to try and make you into the hamster on the wheel in the pod as closely as possible because you are easier to manage that way. And I'll leave that there as the final point. But hopefully people aren't too depressed. Yes. Thank you guys for showing up. Do come say hello on the 28th if you're not too busy. And you guys have a good night.
Good night.
I thought that was